All right, we're going to get started. Calling order the Capital Committee Capital Committee for Wednesday, November 2nd. Approval of minutes from last meeting. I didn't see any. Okay, great, no problem. Discussion today is. We're going to hold off on the discussion from previous, just because I'd like the full committee here to talk about some of those items, if that's all right. Today is the overview of the Nantucket Water Company, Sconset Water Company, Airport, and our Allen Home. And we'll go in order, and if you want to comment, you guys are happy to stay there. If you want to come to the table, either one.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
This is it. You're up.
I'm up. You're up, Bob. If you want to give us the
start,
overview of your.
let's start with Sconset. Can we do that one
We can,
first?
yeah,
and get
that's
that?
okay.
It is the biggest issue in Sconset for 2018 will be the replacement of the water main on Baxter Road, and that's. Really, we've been thinking about doing that for 5 or 6 years now, but with the erosion issue and waiting to see how that was going to stabilize out, easement issues, but we can't wait any longer, and we're fairly confident that by moving the water main over to the left side, going to the lighthouse, that and the way the erosion seems to be stabilizing, we'll be okay. And it's an expensive project for Sconset. But it's getting to, the pipe is getting to be a condition now that it's really marginal for fire protection, and it can't go more than another year. It's just an old unlined cast iron pipe that has 3 people on it in the winter that take water off that 1.6 miles of pipeline. And in the summer it's okay because the irrigation keeps water moving in it. But so the plan there is to go out to bid, pending town meeting approval, but be out to bid in the fall of 17. Want to comment has 2 projects. One is the second year of the hydrant replacement program. It's a 3-year program that we've completed phase 1. The goal being that there be no hydrant in the system over 20 years old. So we replaced 65 hydrants already that were over 40 years old. Phase 2 of the bids opened on November 10th, and that will be 39 hydrants that are between 30 and 40 years old. The next phase, which would be in 2018, will finish that off with about another 36 or 37 hydrants. So then there won't be any that are over 20 years old, and the plan will just be regular maintenance after that. It'll probably be 5 or 6 a year that we'll do ourselves that we will change out. So that's been a huge improvement. All the hydrants around the wharf, you see all the shiny new ones in the areas that really needed the most, but just can't get parts anymore. It's not cost effective to tear them apart and replace them. So that would be paid for by the retainer. The largest program is, if you look at the sheet, you can see that each year water main replacement is a big item. The goal being that by 2022, all of the pipe in the system will be of a condition that you can expect at least 100 years out of it. And pipe put in from 2018 on, we're anticipating that we'll get 200 years out of it because they have developed a zinc coating now that goes metal zinc, then the asphaltic black coating on the outside. So materials are a lot better, but we've identified, so that will be by 2022, all of that pipe will be gone. And just as importantly, all of the lead services will be replaced at that time. Lead and copper isn't an issue for Wanacoma because of our water quality. I believe we are the only distribution system in the state that isn't required to have some sort of additive for corrosion control because our water quality is so good and the pH is so high. Or not so high, but it's 7 point. It's designed in a lab kind of water chemistry, so that we don't have to deal with that. But we've identified the number of lead services that will be replaced each year. For 2017, the water mains will remove 8 lead services. In 2018, we'll take 27 out. Just the nature of because they're the oldest pipe.
Bob? Jim's just
I think maybe you already answered it, but so and I'm no chemist, but the pH has an impact on whether the metal stuff leaches into the water.
7 is neutral. Anything below 7 is acidic, and that, like South Shore Drive, that area is,
And so stuff from the pipe might.
yeah, it leaches out. That's where you get the leaching from the lead and the copper. We're on reduced lead and copper sampling. So instead of every year, we're every 3 years. We just did 40 samples, and there are none that are there were 1 over the action level in a house that hadn't been lived in for a year and a half. So we've got to find a new sampling site. It's just the water just sitting there by itself. Over time will leach out, but it took a year and a half, and just barely well under the maximum contaminant level where you get to get concerned, but just over the action level. So it's just that we thought the regulators want us to identify when we're going to have all of this done. So we went back and looked at our pipe plan and identified the services that are going to be replaced. So next for 2018, North Liberty Street, Lilly, Rush Road, Derrymore, Nantucket Avenue, Lincoln Circle, and Grand Cabot are on the docket. We're doing the design ourselves. We do all of the survey work and the design, then ship it off to a consultant who reviews it and puts a stamp on it. So that's it's not very exciting, but we did move. We swapped the North Liberty Street area with the Prospect Street area to make sure that we have enough flow in place for the hospital when it's constructed. That part of the system is on Prospect Street. There isn't any water main in the middle. Never was. It's pretty small at the Atlantic Avenue end, and not very good at the Mill Street end. So in recognition of the increased fire flow that is already deficient in the area, that we swapped that to make sure the hospital has enough, and the school. So that's our capital plan.
Very good.
So you're gonna, I'm sorry.
Richard?
You're gonna borrow money to do
Yeah.
all of this?
Yeah.
With the exception of
With the exception of the hydrants, the rest is expected to be borrowings. So each year we'd take a look at the budgetary impact of that. There's no question that it has an impact on the rate.
Right.
To what extent depends on what else is needed in the operation side. Brian can get us 0% financing, which I'm sure he can. And, we'll be able to.
Pretty soon they're gonna be paying Brian minus 2%.
No pressure, but, so we're in a little bit of a, it's hard to say what the budgetary, the rate impact is gonna be right now. We are in serious discussion with Mass DEP over the renewal of our operating permit, which is every 21 years. And the state has, we are in heavy discussion about what they're going to require us to do. And, the regulators are kind of one-size-fits-all kind of people, and we're not one-size-fits-all. We're not like any other system in the state, both hydraulically, geophysically, or operational. They're just, a lot of it's dictated by where we are. And so we're making a little bit of progress, but those people tend to dig in their heels sometimes. But we're making progress. But it's important that, because for 21 years you live with whatever they say. They dictate the amount of water you can pump. They dictate some impacts on your budget. For example, they're asking us to do a major leak survey every 3 years. Well, that's $75,000 to $100,000 every 3 years. It's not necessary, in my opinion. So we're trying to, but that's ongoing. So that'll be all settled by mid-February, and then we'll have an impact on that. But the commission has reviewed this plan and is committed to funding it. When we're done, it'll be the next couple of managers aren't going to be having to stay awake at night wondering if the old pipe's going to let go. We've since 1996 we've put in 20 miles of pipe ourselves, and with developers over 37 miles of pipe have been added to the system. We're in a growth time, I think.
Yeah. Jim?
So, I don't know if I remember this correctly, but DEP was talking about putting some limitations on the amount of water that we could use.
Yeah.
And
We have right now. Each well has
Right.
its a permitted amount of water that it
and aren't they around the state trying to winnow those down?
So we're trying to, we recognize that there's going to be a number. But what that number is 20 years from now,
Right.
and what the growth rate is, our population has tripled. The real problem is determining population. That's the real, it's so hard to do that you can hang your hat on. You can use the census, but we know that may be skewed. And right now, the number they give us is 7,500 people in our service system. Well, I know damn well there isn't. There's more than that. So, but the biggest issue we're dealing with is the drought management numbers, because we're not like the Cape, we're not like Martha's Vineyard. There's no connection hydraulically or geophysically between any of us. So we have got them to agree that they'll use groundwater levels on Nantucket and not the Cape to determine where we're at, but we still have a long way to go there. But you'd think they'd want us to pump more because we pay them $8.50 a million gallons. You have to pay the state to pump for every million gallons you pump out of the ground. So, we've spent close to $2 million in 15 years determining the characteristics of this aquifer and what it does. And we just have to keep beating on them to accept that and design the regulations for Nantucket. There's some progress. Governor Baker has told his head guys to listen to the water people. So, and they have.
Good.
They have.
Thank you.
Bob, what determines the amount of hydrants that you'll do at a time? Is it cost? Is it need? For the hydrants? For the hydrants, what determines which ones you do or how many?
By
Is it
age.
age?
Yeah, and so, we determined that anything over 20 years old is marginal for the materials that were done then. Starting about a little over 20 years ago, we required all the hydrants have stainless steel operating parts inside of them. So those will go 20 years easily, but they were looking a little rough. But there were a number of them that were in the over 40. The oldest one was 1913 that we took out, and and we didn't have any confidence it would work when it had to, that being over 40 years old. It just and it's cheaper. Believe it or not, it's cheaper to replace it than to try to rebuild it. By the time you hunt parts down. So we just took a look at the whole system and drew the line at when we're
Right.
Yeah.
Richard?
I just have one question about, I think last year we were talking about the potential of a new office building.
Yes, the new office building is, there's an allocation of $3.5 million. We went through the process, got a design, put it out to a estimator, in the same manner the fire station, the school did, and it came back higher than our appropriation by $1.5 million. Still hard for me to believe that you can't build a stick-built building for $3.5 million, but evidently. So we looked at other options. We looked at modular construction, and a week and a half ago, we had a meeting at the site with, we put out an invitation to people that do modular and had them come by, look at the site, see what, and around the 1st of December, we're going to open those proposals. And modular is deceptive. We all think, when I thought modular, I think the Huntington home type coming in on the trailer, 13 feet wide, put the boxes up like the house I live in. And that's not what other people think as modular. The modular people that came are more panelized, build a panel off island and bring it over. And
Stitch it together.
but we'll see, because the rules changed the procurement rule changed in October on panelized building. Butler buildings were exempt, and now they're not, that type of building. So, be interesting to see, but if we have to go back to town meeting for money, for more funding, we're prepared to do that, but we can stand up and say we've explored all the options. We're just hoping the boiler makes it one more winter. It's the original 1973 furnace, and you never know in the winter if you're going to have heat or not. But we're put a lot of time and effort into trying to get the cost down as much as we can. all the HDC approvals, both for hardscape, the new building, and demolition of the existing building, so we're working on it.
Bob, just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
that includes workshop space?
Pardon me?
Does that include the workshop space?
No, we're good for shop space. Yeah, we're, with our new shop that we have, you know, like most spaces, the minute you fill it, geez, we should have added one more bay, you know? But we're fortunate to pick up a garage for about nothing from, when Schwartz did the old Gardner estate in Surfside. So you want this 3-car garage? So we moved it to Wyers Valley. That's great cold storage. And with the Wyers Valley pump station now, we have plenty of storage because it's a large building that doesn't have big pumps in it anymore. So no, we're not adding shop space. We're pretty good on shop space, actually. We're tearing down shop space with the new building has a little shop in the back, the old building, I mean, that we're in now, but that has to come down to build the new one. So, yeah, thought I might be able to sit in it, but not, that's not gonna happen. So,
I just wanted to say I appreciate the level of detail that went into your request reports. Answered a lot of questions that I had before I even got here, which is very helpful. Thank you. And just good luck getting the regulators to get some common sense through, especially with the investment we've made in our aquifer research. And is there a, if Governor Baker is, and the common sense and Governor Baker are unable to prevail, I mean, this is 20-year period is a long time to be set to a certain regulation.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, is there a grievance procedure for change at some point?
There is. There is a procedure.
Not really pertinent to this.
Every 5 years of the 21-year permit, they will. You can apply for a reassessment of your growth, of your population, of your demand, of your sources. We've asked right now we're due to have it all in by December 30th. The state has been on this now. Our permit expired in 2011. The legislature just keeps extending the deadline. So we've actually had a long meeting yesterday morning, and we're going to apply for a 90-day extension, just to be able to make a better case for Nantucket, particularly the population in the aquifer. There are some pretty restrictive clauses in there now about outside water use. Very restrictive. 2 days a week before 9 and after 5. That's not acceptable to us at all. It's the supply is not an issue. It is just not an issue. And so they have to recognize that and put in the economic factor involved here. Yes, there are a lot of green lawns, but that green lawns means there are a lot of people working. And that means that the people that can have green lawns come here and then also contribute to the community. So our argument is if we have enough water and we've got the infrastructure, what's the problem? What is the issue? Because it's revenue. And that's finally one thing that Governor Baker has told the regulators. You have to consider the economic impact now on a community. You just cannot pass a rule and not look at it. Whether either the rate shock or loss of revenue, or you just can't. So it's a much better negotiating and discussion atmosphere now than it's ever been. That's a good thing. We just have to be convincing, that's all. I think we can do it.
Jim?
So, this is off topic, Chairman.
That's fine.
Cut me off, but
That's fine.
you and I have talked, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I don't understand it, one of your visions was some kind of stormwater treatment.
Right. Stormwater treatment is from a water supply
Right.
perspective is an issue that I think the island needs to address to the treatment of stormwater. We're fortunate that we have a strong stormwater control and review for development within the Zone 2, the area of recharge for the wells. But the island needs to look at stormwater in a bigger sense. Stormwater utilities, separate stormwater utilities are probably the fastest growing utility in the water resources business across the country. There are a couple in Massachusetts already, North Reading, I believe Chelmsford, a couple in Vermont, where they are a separate enterprise fund. And they either charge based on roof area or on the tax rate, so based on their appraisal. But it's an area that, and I know that town management is looking at stormwater, but it's a lot of potential for growth for the town and for adding another level of protection.
Thank you.
Richard?
Just one last one, this may be off topic, but I understand this may be your last Capcom visit?
This is it, my last rodeo. I'm retiring April 30th of 2017.
Who do we have lined up to replace you?
We closed on a place in Wells, Maine on Friday.
Oh, wow.
And after going through that, I told my wife I'm dealing with two other homes in my life, funeral and nursing.
That's a great line.
And if there's a banker involved with any of them, I'm not even dealing with that. I can't.
How are we doing on your replacement? That's what I'm concerned about.
Don't be concerned. We're working on that. We have a plan. We have someone in-house.
In-house, okay.
Who is, or was, so I hope still is, but we're having a lot of discussion about with the commission and have had about not just replacement, but about the management model itself and taking a real look at what we do, what we see we have to do, what resources we're going to need. We've done some of it wasn't a lot of fun. You know, when you really take a look at yourself, sometimes you have to be brutally honest and frank with each other. That's been interesting, but I am confident that the water company will be in good hands. When you think there'll be since 1880, I was the fifth manager. There'll only be six since 1880. So we have a history of stability but it's probably the biggest issue we're going to deal with, certainly. And we hope to have, the commission hopes to have things, we all do, pretty well nailed down by the end of January. But right now our focus is our Water Management Act from a then succession. So, yeah, this is,
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, absolutely.
it's been a ride. It's been a ride, that's for sure. But
Bob, we're gonna continue to look at these requests, and we will, if you have any questions, certainly,
Great.
we are doing some site visits.
sure,
Which
over
I'll-
and see
which-
us.
Yeah, I will be. I think I'll be visiting you, but just to get a clear understanding of
Right.
any other on-site feedback and
Yeah.
understanding for that. So, but I appreciate your time, and
Yeah.
always very clear when you present with us. So
Thank you for your
we
time.
appreciate it.
And your support. Okay, take care.
Thanks, Bob. Tom, you want to come have a seat?
Sure.
All right.
Now the real money comes
Good morning. I didn't catch it when you just said you asked.
Oh, yeah. Tom, if you want to just go over some of your requests for 2018 and maybe some of the out years, some of the items there.
Sure.
That'd be-
The way we break it down is equipment and vehicles, and then we have facility upgrades and improvements. And then what we do is we separate our FAA projects because they're 90% FAA funded and 5% state. So for 18, the first that we see are their tires, but they're $4,000 a piece tires, and it's for a loader and a fire truck, one of which is over 20 years on the tires, so we need to replace those. We have in there a de-ice truck at $155,000. We already have about $80,000, so it's going to be a supplemental of $70-some thousand. We tried to get a de-ice truck that was small enough and even rebuild or whatever with the money we had, but there was nothing available. The next one you have there is heavy-duty brush deck, and that actually is going to be removed from this year. We had discussions last week with the state about our ecological management plan and the frequency with which we mow the brush. We can put it out a couple of years, so that may be pushed back at least 1 or 2 years. The next one is a compressor. It's a mobile compressor that we use for jackhammers for the sprinkler system, blowing down different lines like we just did the other day in our old FBO building, and various uses, but it's several years old. It's I think over 20 years old. So. And then we have a vehicle for security. Currently the security inspections are being done and cross-utilized with basically a trash truck. But we have to do at least 2 perimeter inspections a day in accordance with the FAA and TSA requirements. So that's basically just to give them an independent vehicle. The following year, we'll be replacing the custodial vehicle, which is basically the trash vehicle. And in the facilities upgrades, we have extending the bag belt behind Cape Air. What occurred last year was JetBlue came in and asked for additional counter space. And what precipitated all of this was Cape Air used to handle JetBlue. They lost that contract and Retrix got it. So it worked well when Cape Air was there. They're immediately adjacent. They could cross-utilize their counters. So JetBlue needed another counter in 2 positions. And we couldn't do anything right away with the exception of trying to move Cape Air. By moving Cape Air, we take their Boston flights away from the baggage belt, which they need for security screening. So Cape Air worked with JetBlue this season and allowed them to utilize it. But this project is to extend the bag belt about 18 feet so that it would be going behind 2 Cape Air counters. That way they can utilize those counters for Boston. We can give one of the counters to JetBlue for their expansion and address the needs. We're also looking at, for future project, something called common use. And what that is it's a system where we would own the equipment, the peripherals for the computers. And it would be a computer station with flat screens behind you. And essentially the best way to describe it is if JetBlue has a flight at 10 o'clock in the morning, they could utilize one counter. And then if American had a flight at 2 in the afternoon, they could utilize the same counter. They just log in and their environment comes up, they're into their world, and they do the thing. It will give us a lot of flexibility with regard to development of market share. When the airlines come in and say, hey, I have more flights than they do, I need more counters, we can shift them easier. So it'll give us the flexibility to expand and also to assign counters. So that's a future year project. This is an interim one to address the Cape Air so that we can then expand the seasonal counters, if you will, to what the demand is today. The next is a fire suppression system for the fuel farm. We currently have a fire suppression system. The sensors have all gone bad, and the system is in manual mode. In discussions with the fire department, the fire chief, and some others, we thought it's best that since we have the infrastructure, we should get that back into an automatic mode. It protected actually a big fire out of Boston Logan. So technically we could get away with the manual, we could probably get away with less, but from a liability perspective and the fact that we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this infrastructure, We want to just replace the heads in there, so that's what that's for.
Was it always manual, or was it?
No, it was automated, and it's the rack over top. It's over top of the loading rack and the fuel farm.
Did we just let that lapse or
It just,
something?
they wore out. Believe it or not, they all went almost the same time, most of them. And, you know, that's why I said, we looked at it and said, number one, if you really want to get cheap about it, but that's not something I want to do with safety, technically, they're not required. It can be a local requirement that the fire chief could waive. There's no NFPA or any other requirements. However, as we said, since it's there, it is a safety enhancement, and we said we might as well, you know, reduce our liability and risk by just putting this money into the infrastructure. The next is fuel farm piping replacement. We have an inspection that we're required to do the farm every year, and the most recent, actually last year's inspection, indicated we needed to replace the jet fuel pipes. And yeah, that's what I said. We looked and we searched, and this is for a replacement to replace them with stainless steel pipes as well as the couplings. And we've done a lot of research on how we can accomplish this. As a matter of fact, we're doing an interim fix this year. Right now, as we speak, they're being painted, and that's about a $60,000 project. We have budgeted 100. We got bids for 60,000 on that. So. The next is the lights on the center line and touchdown zone. This is in addition to a future year capital project where we will replace all of the in-pavement lights that are center line touchdown zone lights on the runway. You may recall a couple of years ago, a flight left John F. Kennedy Airport in New York, and it went over to, I believe, I don't know if it was the Philippines or something. It was a long range flight. When it landed, they discovered a taxi or a runway light embedded in the fuselage. When the gear came up, it actually pierced the fuselage, but it stayed in there for the entire flight. I think it was going to Singapore. And so the FAA then required us to, every airport, to go out and inspect every single in-pavement light, replace all of the bolts that are in there, and every time we replace a light or whatever, we have to replace the bolts. We have to torque it to a certain thing, have to buy special tools, the whole 9 yards, because they never wanted to see this happen again. Well, during that inspection, we realized and found that our lights are over 20 years old. We have multiple different types of cans. Some of them have some structural issues. So the long term is to replace all of them. This is some immediate fixes that we have to do because of safety that were discovered. Next, we have a...
Does that include the lights at the beginning of the runway?
No. The threshold lights are above ground.
Yeah.
These are the ones that are flat.
Sometimes planes hit those too.
Yeah, they're...
Because in 1993, I was on a plane that did that.
They hit them all the time. We just had somebody last week hit a runway and a taxiway light. But they're designed to break away, and they have multiple pieces that we buy and we stock. So you'll see in here some, well, we have some other things where we stock pieces for those lights, and we rebuild them, and we have a truck that, so that we can get them on and off the runway, we replace them very quickly. The next is paint beads and rubber removal, markings removal. This is a very high number, and unfortunately for us, it was done in the past by the state, but the state MassDOT's budget has been cut significantly. And this is actually just a portion of it. There's a long-range plan to do the entire airfield. This, I believe, is just taxiway Echo, if I'm not mistaken. We have a plan to do the entire airfield, and it actually came up in the neighborhood of $800 and some thousand to do the entire airfield. And that's when we said we can't afford to do that all on our dime in 1 year. So working with Brian, we looked at it and we came up with a plan where we can spread it out in increments over a 4 to 5 year period. And again, it's all required because of the FAA, and it's hard to describe, but we put so much paint on that when you use the snow plows, it plows the paint right off. So then we have to reapply it, but at some point in time you have to get what's called a removal, markings removal. And we're working with the Vineyard and Hyannis. We've created a coalition. As a matter of fact, we have a meeting next week where we're looking at issues like this to see if there's economies of scale that can be had where we can try to save some money and say, okay, if I need to get marking removal done, the company has to come out of Texas and it costs them so much to ship all the equipment and things, why not do it all together? And that way, we put out a bid maybe together and lower the price. So we're working on that. The other thing that we're looking at is possibility of purchasing a piece of equipment to do this and save us some money. $700,000 or $800,000 piece of equipment, but the thought might be that if we can spread it between the 3 airports, we only need it for a few weeks out of the year. They each need it, so we could use it. They, you put it on the boat, send it over to Hyannis. They could send it over to Vineyard. One of the sticking points is who's going to maintain it and so on and so forth. And we talked to the state about that, and because we were looking for their funding. So that's a way that we're working to try to cut that down. But in the interim, we have to do this work. The podiums in the TSA hold room, for those of you who have been in the hold room, possibly this summer, it's not a very nice environment. We're working on some lighting things, but the podiums, if you notice, JetBlue has like one we found in the basement type of thing. So we're looking to standardize that and make it just like the rest of our podiums. We're also looking at a smaller one in the seasonal baggage arrivals area because we're working with visitor services. They had an ambassador program in there this summer, and we want to expand on that next year, and found that that's a good location for them. Next is repaving the maintenance road. There's a small section of it's not the perimeter road, but it's a maintenance access road that we utilize between our snow removal equipment building and the main terminal. There's a section that has, it basically, I don't want to say collapsed, but was depressed, and we put millings in there and things now. We need to actually fix it and repave it. It's a small section, but it's something that we utilize for our crews going back and forth on a regular basis. Under the AIP or FAA program, the first one we have is a environmental assessment, environmental impact report permitting. It's a supplemental authorization. The state FAA, everybody said we need to look at the entire airfield, and we've timed this in such a way that we need to have this in place before we do any new paving. So we have a program where we're redoing a lot of the existing pavement. It has no change to the impervious surface. This has to be done before we can put in any additional stub taxiways or anything else. And in our plan, we have a high-speed exit taxiway. We have to relocate some taxiways because of geometry issues. And there's some other separation things that we have to do in our long-range plan. So the environmental must come first. And so, again, what we're doing is we're doing that. At the same time, we're doing existing rehab of pavement. Once the study is completed, we can then start looking into, and we have in our 5-year FAA capital plan, some of the new pavement. Ultimately and eventually would be expansion of the south ramp for additional parking, but unfortunately that's down the road a little bit and a big chunk of money, so we're going to have to ask FAA for that one.
Tom, one moment. Jim, do you want to?
What does environmental work mean?
It's environmental work. It's addressing the MESA, the NEPA, and all the other requirements. It's studying the birds, the plants, and so it's
National heritage. And all that
studying all the habitat, the species.
That's when the people sleep out there waiting for logs to fly by.
Yes, and bats are a new one too. But it's mapping the entire environmental landscape, if you will, so that if we say we want to go do this project, they're going to tell us it's taking so much, you have to give us back or do whatever in kind. So the airport layout plan update with SMS, which is Safety Management System and Narrative, is something that the FAA required of us this year. After our airport layout plan was approved, they came back and said, we're not comfortable with the intersection of what is known as runway 1230 or taxiway Charlie and runway 624. There are two projects or two programs that the FAA has, they've had in place for quite a while. One is intersecting runways, and you may recall a crash a number of years ago where there was I believe it was Colgan, two intersecting runways. They took the wrong runway, went off the end, and killed everybody on board. The FAA is looking at that and saying, okay, we got to separate those and try to eliminate any potential issues or, challenges with that. The other is something called RIMS, which is Runway Incursion Management System. And that's when an aircraft or vehicle person penetrates a surface where it can have a negative impact on the aircraft that is landing or taking off. So an incursion is a very bad thing. If you have it, if we have a small incursion here, it gets reported nationwide and investigated and everything else. As part of the RIMS project, they've come up with what they call geometry issues. And so for those of you who have ever used that runway or taxiway, you come down and then it kind of makes a turn and you stop and hold to cross the main runway. They want better separation distance there, so we have some thoughts. We met with our engineers last week, or actually earlier this week, and we have some alternatives that we're going to propose to the FAA that should be hopefully a lower cost solution. We also brought in air traffic on that. So that's basically what they said. Is they said, you need to basically study it, and this SMS that is referred to in here, Safety Management System, that is something that's going to impact our operating budget this year significantly. 6 years ago, they came out with a notice of proposed rulemaking to require airports to do an SMS. FAA does it, the military does it. Now we're going to have to do it, and we almost escaped it, but because we have just over 100,000 operations, we're going to be required to have an SMS program. They anticipate mid-November having the new law passed. So we're looking at a full-time position on staff as a safety management manager. So it's something they're getting very keen on. The next is a reconstruct apron area 3 and replace 5,000 feet of fence. I don't know if any of you were here, but the state, MassDOT, did a tremendous project for us, and it's online. It's called PCI, Pavement Condition Index. They did every airport in the Commonwealth, went out and studied all of the pavement, looked at the condition, mapped it out, put it on a GIS, and said, and there's a rating, there's a FAA advisory circular that gives you a rating of your condition of your pavement. And it basically says, okay, here's what you should, here's when you absolutely got to fix this need, and we have a long-term program that probably goes out 15, 20 years of when we replace different sections of pavement. This, it says apron 3. We're skipping 2. And the reason we're doing it is the condition between 2 and 3 are close to similar, but 3 makes more sense from a functional operational perspective because it's contiguous what we did just last year, and the fact that between the study and today, and they're redoing the study this year and next year, we saw significant deterioration in Area 3. We actually have rutting from the new American aircraft and the JetBlue aircraft that go in there. So we need to get that done as soon as possible. Unfortunately, I have to live with it next summer, but this is for 18, so that's what the apron expansion is. And the 5,000 feet of fence, we do that on a regular basis whenever we do a capital project because of the size of our perimeter fencing and the expense of it. We try to do 5,000 feet at a time. We're also looking at changing our standard for that fence. So it may be reduced from 5,000 to 4,000 or 3,500, but it may be a more robust fence to protect or prevent the deer from entering onto the airport. Right now, it's an 8-foot fence with 3 strands of barbed wire. It takes a beating down along the beach, but a deer-type fence goes into the ground a little further, and it's a slightly higher fence. So we're looking at that. This is a security fence. There's also a wildlife fence. So we're working with FAA to find out what we should be doing with that and where. There may be sections where it's wildlife and other sections where it's security.
Do you guys have deer incursion? I mean, is there a lot?
We had 3 deer in the fence, or and we had 2 deer in the fence for quite a lengthy period of time last year. We had USDA in twice. We were out there with thermal cameras at night. We tried everything. And finally, one of our guys was brush cutting and brushed a deer out. And our guys surrounded and took 2 deer out in one day. So as of today, no. But they, and for those of you who don't know, deer in airplanes are tragic. They're not good. So today, no, we don't know of any deer that are inside, but we're doing our best to manage them.
So, Tom, as of this report that we have this morning, it looks like versus your October 21st information, or information that was provided us by the town of October 21st, it looks like your capital requests are down about $820,000. And you may or may not be aware of that, but I've got a couple questions as a result, because I like to prepare for the meetings, and I want to ask for the benefit of you being here. We have Brian, we have an October 21st report that shows the projects by department, and the project numbers and the descriptions and dollar amounts don't track what's in front of us today. Are the project numbers not rigid, which is to say, for example, project number 18012 in the October 21st report was for, actually let me use 18009, was for conference room upgrades totaling $20,000. In this report, 18009 is for reconstruction of the apron area, 3, and replace the fence that Tom just mentioned for $2.2 million.
Yeah, that was removed, so I just reused the number.
Okay.
So what you have now was a result of what we got from the airport on, I think, the 26th or 7th of October, when they made revisions to it.
Okay.
Which, when I came back, I input, which is why this got to you on Tuesday, because I made all those revisions. They made changes and stuff, so those came out, and then we.
Yeah, because none of them track. I understand.
I
Okay, that's,
apologize, but-
no, that's okay. I just was looking at this going.
But just so you're aware of the process of what we did, we submitted everything that we had in the plan.
Yeah.
And then I look at it from a financial, global perspective, and I said, no, we need to be around 1.2. Because that, when we look at our debt service and things like that, that's about all we should be able to afford. And actually, that's a little high. So we went and cut others, and then I said, okay, we can live with this now, put the supplemental detail in.
So the other, to that point too, is that the second phase of what they had sent us was a complete reconfiguration, which I just didn't get to yesterday, Monday and Tuesday, of 19 through 27. So some of those plans, some of those things that you see that were cut out of 18, when Jamie gets back, her and I have to work on identifying what the individual, because they just do it by categories. Okay, so say AIP projects, I don't have the complete individualized list yet to be able to break them all out. So some of the projects that you see in 18 that have been cut out could be in 19 or further out. They may have reconfigured them. What they sent me was a complete itemized list for 18 and a compilation of what 19 through whatever is going to be. And they're working on finalizing what those itemized pieces are going to be. So in the next week, 19 through 27 are going to have all the itemized pieces. So something that came out of 18 that was in there from October 21st may end up in 19. So you may see it, it's just going to be pushed out.
Okay. And then, Tom, so your number for 2018 capital request is just a little bit over $4 million versus the $4.8 million it was?
Correct, it's 4.115.
Okay.
And 2.9 of that is AIP eligible, or FA eligible.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
our total cost is 1.36 through the airport. So, and what's happening is our capital program is getting a little more intense on our money because of the reduction in MassDOT funding and some other things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're trying to be careful and spread it out, and working with Brian's group on looking at our debt service and what's rolling off. This year we have a little bit, next year we have a little bit more, and 3 or 4 years out we have some good sized projects rolling off. So that's where we're trying to manage the money and start reprioritizing things.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you.
Richard?
Tom, I just have one question. It's about the loan that,
The town.
to the town. Where are we on that?
My understanding is,
So we submitted it to the FAA. I
They
don't know
had-
if we submitted it to MassDOT yet, but we may have at the same time.
yeah, because they had the same questions.
So the FAA came back with some questions, and we've responded to all of them, or we finished putting the responses together for all of them but one, which I just have to sit with Tom, because I can't refer to a general fund subsidy for $300,000 from 2014, which was for just normal operation budgetary wise, which I'm not sure exactly how I wasn't here in 2014 when it was done, but so we will be submitting back to them. The airport did make the payment in 16 as required, but because Tom and I talked about this, and because we were still waiting for some other approvals, we have reserved that payment on the general fund's balance sheet in the event that we have an issue with. I don't believe, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but I don't believe we're going to have a problem with Mass DOT or FAA once we submit these explanations. And then there's a 19 remaining payments of $235,000,
Which goes
which
into
are
our
built
budget
into the
every
budget. So it's on track based on the signed agreement.
Is there any way you can accelerate that thing?
You asked me to accelerate that capital and deferring it. I mean, if we could, sure, but,
It's not reasonable.
well, I think we're getting to a point where we turned the corner last year. We're getting a little stable. And I say a little stable. The reason I say that is because what I've seen is we had a decent amount of retained earnings and low fuel revolver. This year, we have high fuel revolver but lower retained earnings. So we're still managing the process of exactly how much we need to operate the airport. I think once that stabilizes and we can figure out exactly what we need, there's a possibility of revisiting that and looking at, we're going to talk to our commissioners, that's a whole other story. I mean, I'd love to make enough money to pay it off and keep going and build everything too, but
Yeah.
we're getting there.
Okay, that's
You
what I
know,
was looking for.
I think we're doing okay. My boss says, yeah, we're not out of the hole yet, and I think he's right, because when I'm looking at my operating budget, quite frankly, there are costs there that are unavoidable that I can, within just a few items, there's $250,000. And I need to be able to cover that. And I can't keep relying back on these funds. I mean, if you look at the cash flow of the airport, we get through February, March, and as it comes into, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, you get into March, April, May, you're running out and you're going back into your reserves, if you will. And we need to get off of that schedule. And some of the things that we're doing in that regard, we have non-aeronautical property that we're looking to lease. I just completed a draft, and I ain't completed, it's 95% complete, to the FAA asking for approval to release some land, and it's about 150 pages long, to lease 5 acres of land on Sun Island Road. We have some additional property over on Bunker Road that the Army Corps of Engineers has said we should be clear probably in March of April of 17 to start leasing. They're the types of things that once we get them going, as I explained to our staff, the beauty of those are that once we lease that, and we do it for a longer term, it's a steady flow of income every month. It's not based on season. And that's what we need to do, is build the base so that we have that income so we don't run into these cash flow issues. And we can manage it a lot better. So, no guarantees, but I'd love to be able to do it.
So, so Brian and Tom, does the town have any, say in these leases, or is this just straight airport property that?
It's straight airport property, but it's the airport commission.
Because I know the town's been thinking about leasing some stuff too, and I hear the same terms, Bunker Road, and I'm not sure what the areas are, so.
No, I worked with some of the town folks. I know Bunker Road, there's a section that the town has out there.
Right.
And it seems like they have a little more flexibility than we do because we're considered FAA obligated land.
Okay.
So I gotta get approval from FAA, and then I gotta go through the federal environmental and all the other stuff, so.
In terms of a planning perspective, it sounds like, it makes sense if we kind of communicate and maybe develop a plan.
I work with Andrew and Leslie all the time on our things.
Okay.
Matter of fact, that's what
In
we
terms
did.
of who we lease to and how we market it and all
Well,
that kind of stuff.
We can't say who, but the type of use and the zoning and that type of thing. That's what we look at. We have, in the Bunker Road area, we have what's called a master MCD, commercial development permit. We had actually had tenants on the property, and that's when, if you remember, we found a bomb there, or explosive. We had to relocate them.
Oh, okay, right.
And so that had a negative impact on our budget. One, we had to relocate them. We then had to abate their rent for a period of time. So that ends in 18, about mid-18, I think. So that'll help our cash flow in terms of the income from the existing, but then the area that they were on, we can rent to. But yeah, Andrew and I coordinate before every town meeting too on, what we're doing where and that type of thing.
Tom, do you have any current existing leases out that you're drawing the income from?
Oh, we have 25 or 30 leases.
So if that hasn't stabilized, you're saying future leases might stabilize things a little bit. If that hasn't stabilized it, what's going to be the difference in?
Well, the
these few
leases
extra-
that the leases that we have are nominal in terms of what the income is, and even the 5 acres, I forget what the estimate was about 150, 200,000 maybe a year. It's not a lot of money when you look at what some of the demand is. As I said, we have just a couple of items that are $250,000 are going to add to our budget next year. So but the renewal of some of the current leases, there are leases that are written today that are not favorable or industry standard. Some of our concession agreements are not the greatest. Our parking revenue is dropping significantly, and that has to do with the equipment, and we're engaging a consultant to do the analysis. We have appropriation for the equipment. I'm hoping, and I'm not sure it's going to happen, but by next season we have a major fix to that. But that's another 100,000 or more that we're, if you will, leaving on the table. So we're looking at existing leases, new leases, all of it to put the package together.
Does that report that you said, does that include all remaining leasable airport land, or are you still leaving some for out years
Yes.
to manage? Or?
We have a short-range plan, if you will, within the next 5 years. I have another part of a plan that we have not taken the big steps on, but there's about 100 acres of land that is suitable, I believe, for some development. We have to go through a zoning process change, we have to go through an FAA change, but it's there and available. So that is definitely on your radar.
Are those areas in question? Is there high demand for it? Is there
Yes.
competitive nature
We
to where you can
have a list of
maximize?
at least 20 people that have expressed interest in the Sun Island Road, and there's a maximum of, I think, 7 or 8 parcels there. And we're also in initial discussions with a potential tenant to come onto the airport that would be a very strong tenant to have to build the structure. So,
When you say concession, is that for the restaurant, or what is that?
restaurant's one of the concessions. The gift shop that just closed, we did a mutual parting of the ways with that. The rental cars are concessions. We have an advertising program that we're starting. We've engaged a consultant that's going to be coming in for Stroll and developing a program for next season. That's another thing. Advertising, we're making little to no money, and there's an opportunity probably for up to 100,000 maybe in that. So it's a whole host of things that we look at. The gift shop, I have an RFP completed. It has to go through the review process, but there are some circumstances that are taking place that may not require that. So I'll leave it at that. And we'll have some meetings this week to see.
Right.
But I will be honest, though, the restaurant agreement is not industry standard.
Yeah, it wasn't great a
It's-
while ago.
The language is close, but not, it's just not there.
Yeah.
Typically, the way it works in airports is you establish a minimum line guarantee based on what the rent is, or a percentage of gross, and there are industry standards for what the percentage of gross is, so that you pay the higher of the two. And the base year, the first year, is your base year. You never drop below that. The second year should be 85% of what they paid you the previous year, but in no case lower than the first year. So the intent is that you want them to do more business, so that as they generate more income, the airport generates more income. And again, it's a percentage of gross that should be going up each year. That, the language in the existing lease does not allow for that. It does, but at a very, very, very high threshold.
When's that renegotiated?
At the end of next year. We're starting the RFP process now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a long time like that, I think.
Tom, you kind of taking a 10,000 foot look at this stuff. Your plan for the evening out, leveling out income. Are you? I presume you're taking into account, down year revenues, not just seasonality, but clearly one of the things we face. We've been lucky enough not to have to, but down year revenue can have a serious impact on your.
Well, a perfect example is just last year when we lost Island Air. I mean, that was a dramatic. It was a dramatic hit in the passenger numbers and operations, which reflect in our entitlement money for FAA and the passenger facility charge. However, when you look at the net bottom line, it wasn't as significant as you would think, because the majority of our revenue is generated seasonally from the corporate side. Looking at that, though, we now have Retrix back. There's mixed opinions on what the long-range prognosis is there, but there's another company called Island Shuttle that has been going through the certification process, and I have tried, both senators, the congressmen, the FAA, try to find out where they are in the process, because we need to get them back here. They're supposed to be more of a replacement for Island and a reasonably priced operator. They have two products, actually, and I can't find out. We're getting some good signs because the owner came in and got his ID the other day, but so we're not even, when we look at revenue, we don't even calculate that. If it comes, that's great. So yes, we do, but we do it through a conservative budgeting process where, we make sure that we establish our base and don't get too crazy. So.
Great. Hey, Tom, one question. There's the fuel farm piping and replacement. Is that relative to the 2019 request of fuel farm expansion and rehab?
No, that fuel farm expansion and rehab, and that's probably going to be pushed out a few more years. That is, that's the tanks. So there may be some rehab of the tanks, but the expansion was adding another storage tank, because there are times in the summer where we've run out of fuel. And it sounds like a minor issue, but as I tell everybody, it's not an issue of just simply running out of fuel once. It's once that word gets out in the industry that an island has potential of running out of fuel, your reputation is shot and everybody will tanker up. So the word gets out in the business flying community that, hey, if you're going to Nantucket, take extra fuel, that'll hurt our overall fuel sales. So we're looking at, expansion possibilities, but I don't know that it's going to be a permanent tank because of the nature of the business. We only need it maybe 6, 8, 10 times a year. So it could be that we store a tanker truck there or something. But that's what that project is.
Is that relative to managing the fuel amount, or was there a spike in sales?
Managing the fuel delivery.
Yeah.
It's the sales plus the weather. Because if you get bad weather on a holiday when they're not delivering, and you can't get deliveries right after that or whatever, it gets very challenging. We top off everything before a holiday, and we'll blow through 80,000 gallons of fuel in a good weekend. So we only have 100,000 storage.
Got it. Anything else, guys? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, we'll be in touch if you have any follow-up questions. And,
Okay, great.
Appreciate your time.
Come on out and see us anytime.
Yeah, one of us will be, or a few of us will be at some
Great.
point. Yeah,
All right, thanks.
great.
Thanks again, Tom.
Rachel, whenever you're ready.
Those were from 17, but, this is only 18.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And if there was no number, then that's.
Who's tracking these
Yeah.
things, what, you know,
Yep, yep, it was a good.
some fundamental stuff.
Oh,
Good morning.
Hey.
let me,
Oh, Rachel, I'm Richard Hussey.
Nice to meet you,
Do you know
Richard.
everyone?
I
You met
don't think
Stephen?
so.
Stephen Welch. Good morning, ladies.
Morning. And I think I know, well, I don't know if
I'm
everybody knows
Erin.
everybody,
Hi,
but
Erin.
Erin, this is Erin Kopecki. She's the assistant administrator. She's in the process of getting her license to operate the nursing homes.
Were you here last year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think I remember.
And then she left me for a while to do her
Training.
administrator and
Great.
training in another facility. And
Great, great,
so now we're back at it.
excellent.
So the sheet was revised and provided to you. There was a couple changes. One thing that got a little fuddled, it appears that Jim just showed me, was when Ryan and I were looking at it. It says OAH tub and shower room upgrades for $325. That was actually already approved for 2017. I think that got mixed with the OIH resident room upgrades. So where it says tub and shower rooms, I'm fairly sure it should say resident room upgrades. And the original amount was $200,000, but we have been working with Medline Industries that provides a lot of the furniture for the resident rooms. And when we originally secured the quote, the furniture came into about $168,000. However, that was about 3 years ago. And with the Medline is on state contract, and I asked for an updated quote to be sure, because it was even brought, well, if you do $200,000 for how many rooms you have, you're only looking at about $8,000 per room, and that did seem a little low. So it could be that $325 might be more in line with what we need, but I can't get a more accurate, up-to-date quote from Medline until next week, because they have to enter us into their formulary. Apparently, that whatever the state contract is awfully complicated. Basically the other items that relate to the resident room upgrades. The furniture has not been changed since the opening of the building in 1981. It's rather beat up. Some of them are in extremely poor condition, and some of the drawers don't always work. So what this refers to mostly is the headboard, baseboards of the beds, and the side tables, dressers for the residents, and the closets. The closets are more like standalone sliding door closets. They've actually come up in survey as hazards to our residents because I believe it's Formica and plastic stripping that is on it has been coming off. It's just pressed board, which is what it's made out of. They're very hard to open, and the residents themselves can't usually utilize them. So we were looking into closets that were more user-friendly for the residents and met the codes required, because we can't have them at a certain height since they get too close to the sprinklers. So that was one area.
Jim,
So,
go ahead.
I don't know how you want to handle this, but remember how we did our buddy system, where a member of the committee is going to sit with the.
Correct.
So we did that, Rachel and I did that, and I toured the facility, so you want me to make my comments as you go through each one of these, or?
Sure.
So just for my perspective as I toured the patient rooms, just in general, I mean,
I'm sorry, is this under exterior trim and sidewall?
No,
What is this?
this should be, I believe on your sheet, there's 3 items listed in 18 for us,
Yeah.
and it says resident tub and shower rooms,
Oh,
and it should
okay.
say resident room
Got
upgrades,
it.
and the amount's listed as $325.
Got it, okay. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
So, just, an overview, I don't know where to begin, but it's, there's so many shortcomings of that building, okay? And, I couldn't take pictures with residents in them, but I took a picture with, this is kind of what you see when you kind of walk down the hallway. There's no storage in the facility. Things are on both sides of the corridor where they shouldn't be. Just a bit, but let's talk about in terms of the patient rooms. You've got 24 patient rooms, I believe.
Yes.
The code base is coming off. As Rachel said, that the closets are in huge disrepair. There's formica coming. The patients, the residents are at risk for skin tears as they bump up against them. The handles, you can't. No resident could open the door because there's just no. The little handle is like this deep. So this is just basically a cosmetic upgrade to improve, the room and replace the closets. And it's, that's going to make it maybe livable, but not ideal. So I think that's a high priority.
And so they've been managing like this stuff for as many years as.
Yeah, I do know this came up about 10 years ago as one of our capitals that was submitted, but it was held off because about the same time as when we were also looking at a new building in 2007, and plans were being done up. So it was kind of thought, why bother upgrading the furniture and doing what we need to do in order to make the rooms even presentable? One thing I know Jim had mentioned, and I had discussed it a little bit, is sometimes when we walk in a room, especially after somebody had been in there for a very long time, and now all their stuff is emptied out, you walk in a new resident in the room, and not to be put in the minutes, but I'm quite embarrassed to present them with the room, especially if they're a private patient for $440 a day. It's a little dreary. It's not. It doesn't look right.
And I guess one kind of strategic thing for the committee, and I talked a little bit to Libby about this. All these requests are deferred maintenance, deferred whatever. It's not, and for years, maybe up to 10 years, we've been saying, well, we're going to be in a new building. Well, that's the future. That is more uncertain today because of the article at town meeting, which says we need another work group. So while the Board of Selectmen is going to move forward with its own article to replace the facility, these are things that we can't put off any longer. And if we're going to operate the facility from now until a new facility is built, these things need to be done. Because in good conscience, I can't, I couldn't recommend a facility for a family member, given the circumstances that, I saw in my tour.
Good to know.
And one of the things we battled with this was where exactly do we put it in terms of when we do it if we have a new building, because we wanted the furniture that we utilize to be transferable.
Right.
And if we don't really know what that's going to look like in the future, we were concerned about buying furniture and then having to it wouldn't work or it would fail,
Yeah.
replacing it. The other thing so I think the next one is on your list is it the exterior trim and sidewall? So the exterior trim and sidewall, it was originally an estimate that we got about 2 years ago, and we just had it reviewed recently, just prior to being able to come here. So that's looking at about $343,000. We just had our life safety survey, who comes and looks at the buildings, the systems, and one of the things they were very concerned with was our heating and ventilation system. We do have a contract in place right now with Northern Energy to replace some of those boilers and valves to kind of get the system circulating a little bit better, as we find that even though the load that we're putting on the system is higher than what it should be, and the system has already exceeded its life expectancy, if we're going to get a new building, we don't want to completely spend $1 million replacing the system that is only going to get ripped out or torn down. However, we were able to manage to get it so that we can probably last through a good 5 years on the new system. One of the things he noted, however, was part of the problem, even if we do that, is that our sidewall and shingles and insulation is basically gone. I think it's the location, as he indicated, the weathering of where we are, the pounding of the wind, the rain, the salt. Since we're very close to the water, most of the shingles on the side should be like this, they're up like this. So there's not a lot of protection there that they should be. It's almost like there's most of our, especially the south side, might as well not have shingles on it at all, is what he said, is because they're basically doing nothing for you. So that was
And
originally.
The heat's been very, problematic.
Heating system.
Heating system.
Mhm.
And when you get older, you want a warmer environment, and we're not. Again, this is basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, we're not able to deliver an environmentally safe place for people if you can't keep the heat.
Are the windows, the windows have been rehabbed at all, or are they drafty? The windows,
They're
or
drafty.
they've been,
A few of them were replaced. In 17, there's about 90,000. It says window treatments. It's actually should read combination windows. So there are a few that the outside needs to still be done. However, what this will also do is exterior trim and sidewall. Some of the trim on the windows outside itself needs to be done. Not all the building trim, but some just around the windows, and then some of the exterior trim. Most of it is the south side.
yeah.
But that would help also seal so that they're not drafty. So even some of the windows that we have been able to replace with prior capital are still drafty because the trim itself has deteriorated, or the window sills are basically gone. So we have a lot of plastic over the window.
I got you. Richard?
Is this a local firm who's giving you this bid?
For the exterior trim and sidewall, yes.
What's the bid process?
We actually, well, the estimate, I should say. What we actually did was just have the construction company come and do a walkthrough 2 years ago, and since they already had everything on record, just come back through and update what they anticipated would be needed and any additional deterioration of the building. The actual bid process for this would be we would have to drop an entire bid package, post it, and then likely it might be
So
a
it's comparable
non-final.
to any other town
Yeah,
departments?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
just curious.
Yeah. And I do think that the company that gave us the estimate might not even be eligible to bid, but they've come and looked at that for smaller projects, so they were familiar with it, and Nantucket related prices, so I didn't want to have just anybody who might underbid the cost, so we had a better estimate. The last one that's listed there should be kitchen and laundry renovation. I'm not sure of the exact wording. I know that these were two separate projects, but we recently had to, in talking with Brian, it was decided to combine them together. What we are finding is happening is originally when we had started putting this in, we only had one washer that was slightly malfunctioning and an issue with our walk-in. We have since then replaced the condenser unit for our walk-in refrigerator. However, based on our most recent survey and things that have happened over the last just about 6 months, our walk-in freezer is in need of replacement, and at least, well, one of our washers could be possibly part fixed, but one washer basically breaks down like once a week. So our thought was, at this stage, if the equipment that we have is already starting to break down, it's highly likely that everything else that's about the same age is not far behind. So we might as well start looking into replacing both of our washers that are acting up rather than just band-aiding it as we have been going for all these years. What ends up happening, even when one washer is down, we get extremely backed up and end up creating a lot of overtime for our staff to try and catch up on what that one washer didn't do. For our
And
freezer,
you've looked at outsourcing and looking at
Yeah.
local laundries, and the
It's-
price is very high.
it's not even worth
It's cheap, overtime's cheap.
much cheaper. And with in the kitchen renovation, a lot of the issues that we have is with the lights and the freezer. We actually ended up receiving a deficiency tag on our freezer because of the condensation that ends up building up in there.
They can't maintain the, and again, these are the things that need to be done to operate the facility today. If you can't maintain your temperature in your freezer, you can't have a nursing home, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, okay.
And that's to replace the motor and not the box.
Just the,
The compressor and compressor.
And it's our stove and one other standing freezer that we have multiple issues with.
There are some things on here that, I mean, there were several things on here that, there's several things not on here that could be on here. One of them is the generator,
Yeah,
as they've done
for the
live testing.
facility?
They recently did a live, when we had the storm, they lost power for 12 hours, and the load was pretty close to the maximum, allowable, whatever, by their engineer. Now, as you've gone in and are adding all the HVAC upgrades, the concern is it's gonna be over that, and the new generator has not been put in the budget. So those are the kinds of things that have had to be deferred to get this number close to $1 million.
and the generator recently came up at the survey as well, and he indicated that it was probably likely we would need to replace our current generator within the next 3 to 5 years at the absolute most.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
He just was very concerned that if we didn't look at replacing that in the next 3 to 5 years, we would actually not have a functional generator to handle our building if we required it. As I was walking and touring Mr. Kelly through the facility, I was trying to also show him a few of the other things that might not seem as cosmetic as this, that are great concern to us that we should or could be putting in for capital. And part of the reason why we haven't is how much are we investing in this building, or if we're going to get a new one. The other major thing that came up at Life Safety is our storage. He threw out a percentage, and he said if I could just do a very small educated guess, I would say that we're at least, we need about 50% more storage. He actually thought it was much lower than what we actually had. That's why in that picture you see all the stuff in the hallway. By life safety code regulations, there is to be 0 in the hallway. We have lifts, we have trash receptacles, we have laundry receptacles, we have everything is in our hallways. We have a bathroom by our tub room that is actually used as storage, not the bathroom. So there's a lot of things, and the only way to get up to code with what we need for even storage and hazmat rooms to handle our hazardous waste is to probably create a new addition to the building that is simply a storage unit. What would that cost? I don't know. I can throw, even if I said it would only be $500,000 to create what we needed, you're now getting into dangerous water, because once you go over a certain amount of capital to the building itself like that, you're now charged with bringing everything else up to code. So there would be a lot of waivers we would have to file, such as our electrical panel is right out in the open. The life safety man was completely baffled at the fact that we were even allowed to build a building, even back then, the way our electrical panel is, because you could walk in right now and just throw our electrical switch and shut down the entire power.
I wouldn't do that.
There's nothing protecting it. So he was even surprised that that was even allowed. So
Another
there's a
option
lot of
would be to
concerns.
begin to, close off, not take any admissions, and
Yeah.
just convert patient rooms to storage, and then tell those folks there's no room and they're going to have to go to the Cape for personal care. So it's a pretty dire circumstance.
Yeah, like the
storage-
private rooms that don't, the bathroom's not fully working. would be the best run to close down and use as storage.
So storage considerations, though, are not in this.
They are not, and we have not done that because in order to, basically because if we're going to renovate or get a new building, why invest
Yeah.
that amount if they're allowing us to continue through without enforcing those upon us, knowing that we're in the process of getting a new building?
Do you know, just jump back to the generator real quick, do you know if there's if it's serviced annually, and maybe who does that?
It is, yep.
Yeah, is it,
I can't think of the company.
But they don't
I
bring
almost
that,
wanna say
they
Medco, but-
don't do what they call, I don't know what they call a full load test. Material, they have to bring that, this big, like this big generator in, in case it doesn't work. But they did have, during the storm, they were down for 12 hours.
yeah, do you?
We test it monthly, but it's not the full load. So
Yeah.
the entire power is not shut down. The generator itself is just tested to see what's connected to it and what will kick on.
Because normally, we look after a lot of generators, a lot of them should be cycling weekly. Once a week, they come on and cycle for an hour or two, and it's just, I was gonna ask you if you've recognized, if you've seen, if you've heard it come on or
Ours
anything.
is monthly.
Is it?
And they can set that up.
Yeah.
Whoever does the service, they can just set up the interval more frequently. It's probably better for you all, given the severity of issues, if it were to fail, that you know, for instance, if it checks once a month and it failed somewhere in between at day one after the test.
Yeah.
If we were testing weekly, you would know within 6 days that something was wrong, which would give you, depending on how things turned out, if a storm rolled in, you may have needed those extra 3 weeks. In any event, as a life safety type of operation, you should certainly have it.
Yeah.
But they
All
probably
of
can
our
set that up.
regular
Yeah,
checks,
that's true.
especially, because I'm pretty sure it's just, I'm trying to picture the log if it says weekly or monthly, but I do know that all of our monthly checks are done internally by our plant supervisor. It's only once a year that we might have somebody come out and service. And that's all life safety has ever required of us, so that's all we've ever done. So if it should be that even if we did 6 months and had a company come and test it, rather than an internal test.
Is it enclosed, or is it,
It's enclosed, yeah.
so it's got?
They have like a generator shed.
Okay, that's good.
Rachel, who's the regulatory agency that oversees? You mentioned.
A surveyor and life safety.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. Who is it that's allowing the facility to operate as it is without requiring more upgrades?
The Massachusetts Department of Public Health.
Okay.
They ultimately are the ones who, based on our surveys, they do surprise inspections annually with surveyors that have backgrounds in either nursing, social work, dietary, administration, any of those, and it's our regular annual, it's called a standard survey. And then we have a focused survey that is strictly life safety codes. So they'll have a life safety surveyor come out. And usually one follows right after the other. If we receive a plan of correction for those, or a statement of deficiencies, I'm sorry, and anything that's listed that they find that we need to correct immediately, we have 10 days upon receipt of that to provide them with a plan of correction and how we're going to fix it. And then if they are satisfied with that, they could come back on site and review what we've done, or they do a desk audit, and then they say, okay, you are now recertified to continue to be a licensed nursing home licensed nursing home in Massachusetts, and continue to provide Medicare and Medicaid. And then we also have to file with the federal agencies when they request it to receive Medicare certifications. So if Medicare, though, is just a level of care that we provide, it's really the State Department of Public Health, and when they do their on-site surveys that say, if our care is okay, and if our building is okay, then okay, you can continue to be a nursing home in the state. They're really the ones who have the final say in kind of everything.
Over a number of years, both on the finance committee and on the board of selectmen, we've seen the list of deficiencies increase, and our ability to fix them hasn't kept up with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that they couldn't hit us for deficiencies with easily, but they know that the
intention
impact
is that
to do so
their
is,
option of because they threatened to quote, close us down, all right? The tension is, it has to get but there's no place for those residents to go, because everybody's full. So there's kind of that tension that they've got in their own heads about, do we shut it down, or how far along are they on their way to replace? We don't have a place to put these folks, so,
Yeah, one of the big things that we had about a year and a half ago was with our heating system. When it failed at least 3 different times, and the temperature dropped once in the middle of summer, so it got way too hot in our building, and twice in the middle of winter, so it was far too cold, to the point where we actually had to remove some residents from their rooms and have them sleep in the living room where we had space heaters. That would have been a consideration if we were not able to get our system up and running to bring the temperature back up to a safe level. That would have been a situation where they would have stepped in, did an immediate jeopardy, and probably had us relocate all of our residents and close the facility until the entire system was upgraded. And that's kind of the dangerous waters we're starting to enter into again with just our heating system. Our plumbing system is not great either. We've been able to limp through with that. The DPW has been extremely helpful. But if for some reason we start to have the backup and issues that we had before without being able to clear it, then we can't use our kitchen. We can't use our kitchen, we can't feed our residents, they gotta go somewhere else. So it's kind of this huge domino effect that everybody's kind of tap dancing around, and unfortunately, I just don't wanna be there when the incident happens, and we've been sitting here for so long saying, well, we're gonna get a new building. So hopefully we've been able to get through, great. So hopefully we can continue to do that while hopefully the work group and town meeting and everybody
Some
pushes
progress.
through.
So my question is, what is the planning timeline from the time you get a green light for a new building? How many years will it take between that green light and when you move in? And what are you gonna do with the old building in the meantime?
I
Do-
certainly
do
have
do
no
Band-Aids?
ability to answer anything about the old building in the meantime. That obviously will be a
So I guess the
town board
plan is,
decision,
we'll
but-
do it annually. We'll look at what the biggest problems are and try to fix those
Mm-hmm.
in a short-term way until we get into the new building.
Yep.
But what is your planning horizon for the time from green light to move in?
If we are able to go to town meeting and get the green light to move forward, I would expect that it would probably take at least a minimum of a year to get what is called our determination of need application with the Department of Public Health approval to actually build the building and do the project.
Right.
And then from then to bid out the project, get the architects, all the subcontractors, and begin the building.
Is that another year?
I would probably anticipate it would take 5 to 8 years from green light before we would be transitioning to our new
Well, so
building.
you gotta deal with this building for the next 5 to 8 years,
That is my understanding, yes.
in the best-case scenario.
Correct.
So are we looking at enough numbers in out years to?
Given that information, I don't think this capital planning process for this particular facility makes any sense to me. This should, we've got a 5 to 8 year window on a kind of an historic building, in some senses, certainly, not well maintained. We're kind of band-aiding it. And I've been sitting here thinking more along the lines, probably somebody on the street would be that, oh gee, that's nearly $1 million, and in a couple of years, we're gonna have a new building. But, I'm obviously, as that person on the street, foreseeing that it gets approved and it gets built, and I'm foreseeing it on a timeline that's not even realistic. So from that perspective, I would think that, there needs to be a more intensive development of a plan so that this isn't, put the plan out there, whether everyone approves it or not is a different process or a different position or determination, but it just seems to me like this isn't enough for this facility if we're looking
At this point.
yeah, best case scenario, 5 year from the date it's, I presume, approved at town meeting, which is in April of next year. So, and probably more likely 6 or 7 year. So I mean, we're looking at this is likely, it could be a 9-year before the facility, the people in the facility are being moved. Planning this like this seems, I mean, it's not our role to plan it. I'm just saying, as a capital planning committee, it is our role to be saying, hey, we need to have a plan that reflects the interests of the town in a reasonable and accurate way. And I don't know that this is a really reasonable way. This is not on your department in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying the way it's been handled to date doesn't make sense to me. Just to put it out there.
So, I was gonna ask for your opinion on timing, and your experience timing for a new facility. What, anything?
But also, I think what I've suggested to Rachel and to Libby is, we can't put this stuff off any longer. We've been doing that every year, and I've been guilty of that too. I've been sitting on the same committees. And I just said this year, we just can't do it. So that's kind of why, and so that's a new thought process, I think, and it's up to all of us to do. But on the timing, I think I'm a little more optimistic than Rachel is, and we haven't.
I am
really
too.
talked about it,
I am
but
too.
I
know
just
that-
go off on what other people tell me. I have no
I just-
idea how this stuff works,
No, I
so
just-
don't
no,
even.
I just know from my experience here in the Massachusetts with all of the hospitals, so we, the town meeting would be the funding source, so we'd have the funding source. We've had consultants work with us for about a year and a half. The Board of Selectmen has made a decision on the location of the facility at Sherburne Commons. We've made a decision on the delivery model, which is a small house model. We've made the decision last week on the number of beds, which is going to be 30 skilled nursing. Right now, we have all skilled nursing beds. It'll be 30 skilled nursing beds and 10 assisted living beds. So with that information and the consultant's information, we can begin the development of a site plan, schematics, initial budgeting, to have that stuff. We wouldn't have construction drawings, to have that stuff by town meeting. And that's the information you really need to, this is about these new buildings. So that's all the information you need to develop a determination of need. And I know just from other experience, that process could take about 6 months if it's done well. And then you develop design documents, construction documents, you all know that better than I do, and then go into construction. I would think the construction phase would be 18 months or so, just for looking at other projects. So I think it's, 5 years is the
I guess where I'm going
That's
with this
where
is,
I went.
we can't, if your generator goes, we've gotta be thinking about that. Even though it's gonna be something that's gonna get ripped out in 5 years, we gotta address the critical issues. They're gonna keep you going.
Generator, that is something that can, I'm guessing it's a piece of equipment we can reuse, and even if it's a generator that comes on a trailer that's maybe covered, that is, I'm not worried about it. If the generator's really, really bad, or if they gave it another 3 to 5 years, then I think we're maybe okay, and if you have a
Yes.
service plan with it, I'm not too concerned with the generator.
If for some
But-
reason, say at April town meeting, the funding got voted down, I would probably definitely submit for
Yeah.
a generator immediately.
Yeah,
In the
in-
next cycle.
Yeah, I have in past years been cautious about adding anything. I think I questioned a few times why, if we're getting a new facility.
Yeah.
But last year I did say that the living situation of the people there needs to be to a point of it needs to be quality living. There can't be no lapse in heating system or the quality of the trim in the room or so I think that to maintain that living quality should still be very relevant up until pretty close to departing that building. Maybe even the
I think what I'd like to see is in the out years, what some of the critical expenditures we'll be looking at over the next 5 years before we get to the new building.
Even 5 years is is a long
Yeah.
time from, I mean, I haven't been in a facility, but from what I'm hearing, it seems like, and Brian, maybe if it's possible we could get I could get a 14, 15, 16 capital request and funding on the facility. But there's a big difference between 5 and 8 or 9 years given. So my initial response was, whoa, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But even still, at 5 years, it seems like there could be a tighter coordination with within our group, within your administrative duties, within just kind of when the facility will be built, whomever's heading that up. Just a tighter coordination so that there's a better idea of a timeline, so there's a better idea of what capital projects really need to be done, and then and when, and then from there, if the town fathers and the Board of Selectmen and whomever are looking at what the facility is being reused for. I mean, there's just a lot of planning that could go in. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but just thoughtful planning that could happen so that we're gearing capital repairs that are needed for the facility to capital repairs that may be beneficial to have done for potential reuse of the facility or interim reuses. We may use it to house some type of town departments for 2 or 3 years while something else is being built. It just seems to me like there's a resource there. It needs to be maintained properly for the occupants now. It needs to meet the state code, and then it needs to be done in a way perhaps that allows us just to utilize it better going forward afterwards. Unless, I may not know, maybe it's just a tear down or something.
Yeah, I think that's for whatever reason, the board has kind of said to themselves, discussion of the future use of the property has the potential for further polarizing people.
Yeah.
There's a group of people who want to, let's say, put salt marsh in there. There's a group of people who say, let's tear it down and give it to the South Land Bank. So as we're trying to get all this done, and people may say, well, I think we need a new nursing home at Sherman Commons, but I want salt marsh, so if they don't do salt marsh, I'm not going to have it. So we're just trying to take it one step, and whether that's right or not, I'll find out.
What do you think?
I would just say, Rachel, if you think you need it in 5 years, put it in there. And the only thing I would caution is back it up. I want, as a member of this committee, I want to see square footages. I want to see, I don't need to know every nail, every screw, every piece of refrigerator equipment, but I want to see numbers. I want to see a breakdown, and I want to be able to, quickly identify it, be able to answer my own questions in a sense by the justification you provided, and then be able to advocate for things. Because we also, obviously have to go in front of the Finance Committee, and we need to state our case assertively, and we need to do it in a way that's defendable so that, these things can be brought forth to town meeting. And I don't know, I would say, if you think it's necessary for a 5-year scope of being there, plan ahead, put it in there. That's just my voice.
Yeah, so I would say, on top of all that, because I agree with it, looking forward, try to think of a really thorough 5-year outlook on what you think the facility will keep needing, removing a little bit of the facility might be temporary from now on because we're going to replace it, but keeping the quality of living the same, that type of stuff that will help you run the facility, keep us in good standing with the state, but try to include those things in the out years. If you don't think that, if you think this year is covered and you're in good shape, great. If there's anything that's really critical, but you're just being a little cautious about it, maybe we're going to revisit this as well as a committee. So, but my other question is, on top of that, on just those few requests that you did put through, at some point, could you just fill in the data on those? As far as the justifications? Because I don't think I don't have those. Or did you submit it and it just hasn't been inputted yet?
No, I mean, I think there were more placeholders at this point because of the planning for the facility, but we can certainly put I can put descriptions and justifications in, that's fine.
Yeah.
I can just work with Rachel on that, that's not a problem, and I'll do that.
Okay. I know it's
No, I think-
time consuming. It's just
we-
because one of the items is like equipment, vehicles. Other than hearing
Yeah.
Rachel's presentation, when I read it prior, I just want to have it coming in.
No,
Okay.
Rachel shared, yesterday, she shared those documents, so those back, it talks about all the stuff that, code base, and so that's, and she can just,
Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
I
I can
just wanted-
certainly
I
get
just
more
wanted in our-
detailed though,
in our-
especially with the exterior
Yeah.
trim and sidewall, I can certainly
I can
get,
plug it all in, that's fine.
Okay.
rather
Do
than
that, and I'll
online.
resend these all to you. I'll do
That'd
it
be great.
this
Yeah.
week at some point, and then send them back to you
Yeah.
with all that, that's fine, no problem. Yeah, I
I-
can do that.
Yeah.
And just one other, Rachel, while we've got you here, and Jim here, obviously, a wonderful resource for the Board of Selectmen. You had mentioned that you need to do the facility needs to be licensed through the state. A new facility would need to be licensed through the state. Is that something that you're aware of or you're not aware of? Can be done concurrently with the town's planning for, getting the appropriation, getting the design together, getting the bids out? Can those happen concurrently, or because of the
They
ways?
can start to be, yes,
Okay.
especially filling out the determination of need application. What they require for the nursing home, they really do not want to see an application until they know that the funding has been basically allocated and approved. But they want the construction documents. They want to see architectural plans for the building. And that's because it goes through a couple different departments, and they might start tearing it apart, saying, no, you don't have enough of this, you don't have enough of that, so that they can go back,
You can have
so.
schematics, you don't need design.
No, they told me they wanted the actual design construction documents
Design
attached to
construction, but not,
it. No,
okay.
But Jim, you would say, again, this is just for our future, my advocation, but our future use perhaps. You would see that this process, given what Rachel said, would be that the town we're developing this concurrently without one really holding the other up substantially. In terms of her permitting and our getting
To
the,
me, it's like schematic design documents, and then construction drawings.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
kind of the three steps. So what DON needs is design documents. So not bid documents. So, and so we're not even at the schematic phase yet. We're just we just made the decision on location a few months ago and model, small home, and then last week made a decision about the beds. So now the architect can begin to work on schematics. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not trying to play this, but what's really, this Article 5 would set up this new work group of people who, I'm not making up this way, but, there's some people who do not want the RL removed.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
and a lot of those folks are now on this new work group, so, that's kind of that's a wild card, we don't know how that's gonna play out. And that group hasn't even, they haven't had their first meeting yet, so that could be, we don't know, that's an unknown in terms of the impact on the planning process.
so Rachel, I'd suggest plan a 6-year capital plan.
okay.
But anything, as I said, the board's going ahead with our plan to put it in for this town meeting. To the extent this committee and other committees can support that effort would be helpful too as we move forward.
How does that sound?
I think I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So, well, we might have some more questions for you. If you want to revisit and we can meet again or whatever. We can
Okay.
figure something out. I did talk to, or I emailed with Katie, who's doing the scheduling. I haven't been to the water company yet, so I couldn't really chime in. But I'm gonna have her send us a schedule. She's gonna send me a schedule, which I'll forward to you for all of our meetings, so that if you haven't been to Ireland Home and you're interested in going, you can go as well, even though Jim, the point person,
Yeah.
um,
I recommend you go, just to get there.
I welcome tours.
yeah, I haven't really been through it either, so
Yeah.
we could set something up.
Yeah.
But, so we will have a schedule of everyone's meeting. Anyone's welcome to attend those meetings, other than just the point person.
DPW is on the 10th, just so you have a heads up.
It was real helpful. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
What's that?
Good.
That was very helpful.
Going through the facility?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Next meeting is sewer and solid waste, is that right?
is that right? Sewer and solid waste?
Is that next week?
And then you want to have do a kind of a discussion, general,
Talk about some of these items, so we can sort of,
catch up a little bit.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
amongst ourselves next week.
yeah, but I want the rest of the committee here, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. Well, we can add
So,
this
yeah.
one to it.
So, Lynn, if you could just, discussion of items, I don't know if you want to just put general.
I'll just say discussion of fiscal 18 proposed capital.
That's great, yeah.
whatever.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm wondering is
Thanks,
if,
ladies.
thanks you guys. I'm wondering is if we have it, can we move it to after the presentations?
Yeah,
So that we can do it on, we don't have to let them wait?
yeah,
Is that okay?
yeah, I'm in, the order doesn't really, you
Yeah,
can
we
take
can,
them as you
at
choose.
the time,
yeah.
okay. Sounds good. So, motion to adjourn? Second? All right.
Thanks.
I'll miss you guys.